when you jump on Instagram, you don't need a huge following to connect and make sales, So the longer you wait and get strategic, the longer it takes to find the people that you want to work with.
Welcome to Here's What I Learned. I'm your host, Jackie Hayes, Systems Strategist and Operations Support Specialist. My guest and I share the lessons we've learned about making value-based decisions, leading our teams in new ways, and rejecting traditional business advice when that advice doesn't align with the life we want to live. If you're a solopreneur or small business owner tired of the same old scale for the sake of scaling way of doing business, then you'll want to stick around and take a listen. So put in those earbuds, get your morning mile started, and enjoy the episode. On today's episode of Here's What I Learned, I'm talking with Jillian O'Keefe. Jillian is an Instagram content strategist for authors, editors, and book coaches. She helps them gain visibility by embracing and showing their unique story to grow their following on Instagram. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi there. Can you tell me, what does it mean to do business to your way to you?
It means being able to have a balance of family and business, not always equal, but one's, maybe a little higher, one a little lower, but being able to have both in your life without the added pressure of crazy deadlines and feeling like you're missing everything and with the kids, and then you're missing deadlines for your clients. Being able to balance both of them in your life is definitely what it means to me.
Can you tell me about your journey in starting your business, why you did that, what led to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what started for me, I started about 13 or 14 years ago, I think it was. My son, I had just gone back to work, or probably been back to work about a year, and I decided that I wanted to stay home with him, but I needed to have an income. So I started a VA business on the side while also working my 9 to 5. And I got to the point where I was able to make enough money to cover our housing payment. And so I could leave my job. That's what my husband and I agreed upon. So I left and I grew. I had brought in a couple of more clients. Um, and in there with those clients, I picked up one that was a very demanding client and kind of has been was the teacher of what now I say is why I want to do business my way, because there was a point where she was having my sister was getting married, and she needed things posted on Instagram, and to her business was her baby. She didn't have kids. She didn't at the time didn't have a significant other, and expected me to just drop everything and post for her. And it was not my favorite thing to do, obviously. So that led me to kind of pivot my business into just doing Instagram. And like I said, she was the teacher in teaching me that I no longer wanted to work with clients that were so demanding. And then in there, the pandemic happened too, and that changed a lot of stuff. And um, there were some pivots in there, but that's primarily how my business came to be as it is now.
I know that there are a lot of contract workers out there in the world who have ended up with a client like that, or some kind of client that does not work well for them. One, because a lot of people who are hiring contractors don't understand that there's a difference between being an employee and being a contractor, and that they could get themselves into trouble if they keep treating their contractors like employees.
Yep.
But also just because we want to do good work for people, and so we'll a lot of times continue to do stuff, even if it's not in the scope of business or whatever it happens to be. And we're not used to the boundaries, because in corporate world, I mean, you're not really supposed to have any boundaries. You're like, whatever they give you, you do it.
Yeah, sadly.
How did you learn how to recognize what your boundaries were, and then how to communicate those effectively?
Um, I still, to be perfectly honest, am working on this. This is an area that I am constantly in flux with, because I am a people pleaser and grew up with a lot of issues where I needed to keep people happy. So it is something that I struggle to still communicate to clients this into this day. However, where I learned it was working for this client that I mentioned. I learned that I do not want to be working on weekends that are as important as my sister's wedding or girls' weekends away. I want to be able to take the time off. So over time, I learned that this just was not the way I wanted to do business. And now I don't necessarily communicate the boundary straight out, but what I do is that when I meet with a client or a potential client, I explain how my hours work, how I'm only working while my kids are in school. Um, Obviously there are exceptions to that, when somebody needs something and there's like a launch or something, but like typically I'm just working during my kids' school day. Um, And if they're okay with that and they're okay with the deadlines that I provide them, I find that they're usually okay with the boundaries that I'm setting. Um, I would probably be pretty nervous having to straight out communicate a boundary to them saying, look, I don't work on these specific weekends. I would get nervous. I but I think if I had to, if the situation arose where I was forced into having to communicate the boundary, I probably would. I just that one client, it was just the catalyst for so much. I learned so much from her. And I guess as much as she was a struggle, I'm grateful for that too, because it gave me the opportunity to learn and build a business that I much prefer.
Right. And it sounds like to me, as you're talking, that like having to remind people of boundaries isn't as big of an issue if you are working with the right people to start with.
Yep. Yep.
How do you make sure that people are the right fit?
So I have um a questionnaire that people fill out ahead of time that tells me a little bit about themselves and what they're looking for, um, what their budget is. It's not super deep dive, but it's enough where I can usually get a idea of whether they're somebody I'd want to work with. Once I have somebody who is interested in working with me, I then get on the phone with them and I don't know. I feel like I'm a pretty good read of people so that once I'm on the phone with them, I can tell whether they're a good fit or not. This one client that I keep mentioning, when I had my discovery call with her, I immediately felt like it was at a point in my life where I needed clients. And so I was willing to take on anybody. But there was this feeling immediately that this is probably not going to be great. But I took her on anyway because I needed the clients. So it's kind of like a vibe thing, which I know seems kind of funny, but it has worked for me. Um, and as long as they mention a budget that is within the range of what I'm, charging, I'll jump on a call with them. If it's somebody, how you probably have gotten those emails or those contact forms that people fill out just because they're curious and they have no budget or their budget is, a couple $100 and it's way below what you would ever ask for. I won't bother. Um, just because as much as I would love to help everyone, I can't. I have to make a living too.
Yeah, I have recently gotten on Upwork just to see about picking up things here or there. And I have found it to be a complete waste of time because the budgets I'm seeing are like $10 an hour for somebody to like manage their team. And I'm like, yeah, I
Oh
don't
my
think
God.
this is going to work. There's very rarely do I find on something like that people willing to pay for the experienced people because in reality, I have 20 plus years of experience that I'm bringing to the table. My business may be only like in its third year, but I've got 20 plus years of
Right.
experience I'm bringing to it. none of that was like easy or free if we're going to count like college education and everything. And people just don't seem to realize like how much it costs to get good quality help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I, Fiverr is similar. I haven't done it in a while, but back when I was doing VA work and just getting started, I did Fiverr, and it was the same type of thing where people were underpaying. They expected a VA to be $10 an hour, and that, I mean, it was 13 years ago, so the wages were a bit lower, but still $10 an hour is nothing for what I was bringing to the table. So I completely understand.
Um, when are people, when in somebody's business is it a good time to start working with you or people in your industry?
So I focus mainly on working with authors, book coaches, and editors. And I like to say that anybody in that industry who is looking to start working with an Instagram content strategist, that you want to start when your publisher, for authors, when your publisher is pushing you to Instagram. A lot of authors are told you need a community, and they have no idea what to do. Some come to Instagram completely clueless. So that would be a time to reach out and at least either connect with me directly or just start following me and checking out my content. As far as editors and book coaches, if they're looking to get in front of authors, following me and watching my content is something that I would recommend probably once they have their packages sort of set up and figured out what they're going to be offering people. Because when you jump on Instagram, you don't need a huge following to connect and make sales, you know? So the longer you wait and get strategic, the longer it takes to find the people that you want to work with. But if you have your packages, you want to start working with people, or if you're working on creating your services, your service offerings, start following me and checking out the content and then doing those things on Instagram to, build up yourself and get ready to start working with an author or, maybe an illustrator.
Earlier, you said that business your way is about family and having time for other areas of your life, which I think is what a lot of us want when we start our business is that time flexibility and being able to quote unquote balance the other areas of our life. I don't really like the word balance because, as you said, sometimes the seesaw has to go up this way and sometimes it's this way. One of the things that I know I hear a lot of online business owners talk about is the time suck of social media, and not feeling like they're getting out of it what they're putting into it. Do you have any tips for them?
So I think it comes down to being strategic. So we all need to space out sometimes, and we're all going to take those moments where we're going to scroll social media. But if you want it to stop being a time suck outside of that boundary that you set for yourself as far as scrolling, I think it comes down to knowing that, what you want to post, engaging properly. So engaging in a way that is not sleazy or spammy, and then posting the content so that you're engaging and it's going out to the people who you want to see it. And that comes down to using the right keywords and um, hashtags. So honestly, I guess the answer to your question is using a strategy, having a strategy on what you want to do with social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever. You want to know what you're going in there for. If you know you're going in there and for the next 15 minutes, you're going to just be engaging with the audience of people that you're hoping to connect with, then that's all you do. And then you hop off. If you are going on to record some reels, then that's all you're doing on there. Knowing what you're doing ahead of time and being strategic about it, I think is the way to make it not a time suck. But that's something that even I, as an as somebody who manages and does stuff with Instagram, struggle with probably more than most, because I'm like, I'm on here for clients and now I want to be on here for my own self.
Yeah. My phone will, I got an iPhone, so it'll tell me like how many hours go
Mhm.
into Instagram. And I'm like, I really wish I could parse that out and figure out like, because I have my personal account and my business account, but also it's like, how much of that is actually productive time that I spent, connecting with people, following people, engaging, and how much was it actually scrolling? Can you please somehow phone tell me, tell me which one it was?
Yes, I agree. I've always said that I wish that I knew what, I mean, I guess I could time myself on my computer or, through
Mhm.
one of the timing apps that are out there, but that's just one more thing to remember to start and then stop. So it just would be better if the phone could tell me.
Yeah. When we're talking again about that, being able to find time for family, um, and you mentioned that you work during the school hours, so obviously that's one way you have created space for that. What are some other practices that you've put into place so that you can assure you have time for the things you want outside of your business?
Um, Honestly, it just comes down to prioritizing the responsibilities that I have in my life. So my husband is technically the breadwinner in our family. And that means that a lot of the appointments, my own doctor's appointments, my children's doctor's appointments, any errands that need to be run, that usually falls to me. So I prioritize. And that means that during school hours, for the most part, that is work time, unless there's some sort of appointment that needs to come up. And then if an appointment happens during that time, I just sort of shift things. And then sometimes it does mean that I have to work in the evening, but I try not to. Um, but there are also days when the kids don't have any activities where if it's either I do some work or I read a book. So, and typically I choose read a book, but if I have to sit down and work, that's not a big deal. Um, but I know prioritization seems like such a buzzword that people say, but it really does come down to that. Like knowing this, for instance, this week I knew I had a lot of calls on the docket and I wasn't going to have a lot of time for work. So what I'm doing is in between, I'm being more strategic with my time that I have, 10, 15 minutes here and there. Instead of normally sitting there scrolling my phone, I'm actually sitting down and writing for 10 or 14 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes. um and it's helping, it's actually helping me get things done. I am somebody who does better when they have strategic specific chunks of time listed out for the day rather than having it all haphazard. I'm very good at sticking to a schedule.
How did you learn that time blocking or, knowing exactly when, what thing you were going to do when, how did you discover that that worked for you? And did you try other things first? What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was trial and error. I used to just I'm not great at time blocking for my business. I tend to spend more time on some things than others beyond the windows that I give myself. But as I've gotten older and I've realized that there's just not time for everything, no matter how hard I try, um, I learned that I guess time blocking is the way to go. Like having the chunk of time dedicated to, like, today, this week is all calls. And then next week will be hopefully very work intensive. Um, so trial and error is all I can say. I don't think there's never really been an aha moment. It's more just this is what works. And so I just keep doing the same thing.
That and what you said about, sometimes you work in the evening. I find that a lot of people, when they start their own business, kind of set up rules. And a lot of times those rules are based off of what they were used to in corporate.
Yep.
Um, and then if they give themselves the space and the freedom to do the trial and errors, they may find that, maybe they initially wanted to only work these hours. Um, and then they find, oh, well, wait a minute. It's okay if I go ahead and work in the evening.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean I'm letting go of, these hours, or I'm not prioritizing things that I want to prioritize. I mean, the wonderful thing about being in a business for yourself is you can set your own hours. And so,
Yep.
like, if I want to take a doctor's appointment in the middle of the day, it's no big deal. I don't need anybody's permission. And then if I want to, I can, make up time in the evening or on the
Absolutely.
weekend. That's something I've given myself permission to do. Is there anything in your business that you have had to give yourself permission to do?
The same thing, the doctor's appointments during the day, because just like you said, when I started, the days that my son was in daycare only 1 or 2 days a week, I think. And on those days when he was in daycare, I was worked from 8:30 until 5 o'clock and took lunch. I only gave myself 30 minutes for lunch. And that's no longer the case. Like right now I work 9 to 2:30-ish, and I take lunch whenever I want to for however long I want to. Um, and I take doctor's appointments when I need them. If and honestly, I tend to do them mostly during the day because one, that's easier. Not a lot of doctors are open in the evenings. And two, then that leaves my evenings free to, either spend time with my family or read a book, or if the kids have activities that night. So it's the same type of thing, giving myself that permission to take doctor's appointments or any type of appointment during the day, grocery shopping, things like that.
I laugh to myself all the time because I'll go to the grocery store in the middle of the day and it will be busy. And I'm like, don't you all have a job? And then I'm like, wait a minute. That's that's the old me working. What would your present self tell yourself on day one of your business? What kind of advice would you give?
I would tell her that you don't need to take your business so seriously. And I'm not saying that business isn't serious, but it doesn't need to be the end all be all of everything. It doesn't need to be a fight every time that you need time to do something. That there's a balance that you can create for yourself, that you don't need to worry about hustling it all into the chunk of time that you have, that it'll work itself out. Because I was so intensely focused when I first started my business, and I mean, that was big time hustle culture, and everybody was Gary Vaynerchuk was like huge then. I mean, he's still pretty big now, but like that was the go-to, and I just followed that, and it's it's not that serious. You can still have a successful business without going in and working 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, whatever. Nowadays I work far fewer hours than that, and I still would consider myself a success. So that's what I would tell my younger self, and I hope she would listen.
I was just talking to somebody today about like giving advice to your younger self, and they're like, yeah, but would you at 20 have really listened anyways? And I'm like, no, because at 20 you think you know it all.
Yep, yep, absolutely. I would have been like, well, no, this is the only way I'm going to be able to make money. I got to do it.
Yeah. Where can the listeners find you?
I am primarily on Instagram, and my username is at Jillian Finding Happy. And please connect with me over there. Send me a DM. I love chatting. I love talking, getting to know new people. So send me a message and let's get to know each other.
Excellent. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Here's What I Learned. You can find the show notes and transcripts at jackiehayes.online/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to leave a review and follow the show. Be sure to find me on Instagram at JackieHayes_OBM and let me know what you learned from this episode. Catch you next time on Here's What I Learned.